Hello, crafty friends. I'm Susan Boback, the card connoisseur, and I'm so glad you joined me today. If you're new here, I thank you for joining, and I invite you to come back for some artsy techniques with either card making or any kind of paper crafting. Now, I've been following Tina Zinck out of Nova Scotia, Canada for probably 6 years, and what draws me to her work is that she's very artsy. She uses the tools we have at our fingertips for making cards, but for making other projects, she brings them in, and I love anything that goes kind of offbeat. Today, I want to show you a technique that I watched her do that's more on the artsy look for cards or framed prints that uses ink as paint. Now, if you're not into the artsy look, I'm going to encourage you to stay with this anyway, and you might find out that using something from your household cleaning products, bleach, brings a new look to your ink or your colored cardstock, or even some of the errors that you've made with ink that you'd like to remove. So there's going to be so much information, but I hope that I can make it simple enough for you that you'll want to follow along, excuse me, or even try it yourself. Now, this is a print made with the new Stampin' Up! Stamp. It's in the mini catalog and available online. And then this is the more artsy look. It might look too dirty or muddled in the background, but I'd like to show you some variations of using ink and then using the bleach along with it. So what you really need is some watercolor paper. Now, I buy my watercolor paper at Michael's, and I know other craft stores have this. Note that this says 140 pound. So you want something like that. Now, I just bought this recently at our dollar store because I was running out. It's a possibility for you. You just have to play around with the different papers, but I wouldn't suggest trying this technique on computer or printer paper. It's too thin and it doesn't absorb the fluids. And the other thing that we're going to use today is water-based ink. Now, you can either use it from your own stamp pad or you can use water-based markers. Do not use alcohol-based markers because they'll dry instantly and they won't move around on the page like I'm going to show you. Also, I have smoky slate ink that I'm using from Stampin' Up, but you could use whatever basic color. You could also use black as long as it wasn't a permanent ink. And we're going to start with that. And the other thing that you're going to need to have is you're going to need to have a clear stamp on a clear block. And the purpose for that is once you stamp it in the first process that I'm going to show you, once it's dry, you're going to need to stamp it again. So you're going to need to line it up. And if you don't have a clear stamp, and the stamp that you want to use is a cling stamp or a red rubber stamp, you'll need a platform type of tool where you can put your stamp on it and continually move it up and continually put the plate over, back and forth onto your print so that is what lines it up. I'm not using my platform today, but I'd be happy to show that to you sometime if that's something that you're unfamiliar with. So you're going to see a lot of different prints that I played with here. Let's just start right here. Now this, I did use, as I said, this stamp right here. And what you do first, and I will show you how to do this, you are going to spritz your watercolor paper so that it's wet, not so wet that you can see it folding up or that it's dripping. Then you're going to take and ink up your stamp. Then you're going to stamp it in the water, get a good print, and lift it up. And that's what it looks like. And you'll want to tip up your paper so that the ink can move around, because remember, this is going to be an artsy look. Now, I did that here with some bird and some holly. I haven't finished this because I wanted to show you what you can do with the bleach. This one, I had stamped the trees, but I didn't like the way they came. So I added the marker, and I'll show you what I did with this one with the ink and these other two. So just setting that aside. Now, I've got my print that I did this morning drying in the sun, so let me grab that. These aren't quite dry, but they'll show you exactly what I want you to see. Now, there's a little bit of moisture left here, and that's okay. And this is just fine. This is the kind of look that we want, to have this artsy print background. And Tina Zinck showed this on her YouTube channel, but she was inspired by an artist, Andy Skinner, and he's also on YouTube. And you know, when we see a video of some technique online, the idea is to learn from it. And if you learn from someone's technique, you should give them the credit, but also the opportunity you have then is to make it your own. It used to be called casing, C-A-S-E-I-N-G, and that stood for copy and share everything. But I don't like to use acronyms. I want everyone to know what I'm talking about, so I will say that I am inspired by Andy Skinner and Tina Zinck. So now I'm just going to take my clear poinsettia stamp, and I'm going to ink it up in the basic gray, the same color that I used right here with the water. And I'm going to try to line it up the best as possible. And I'll stamp it right down on top of it, get a good pressure. And you can see that it did bring out the color. Well, the next thing that I'm going to do is show you what you can do then with a fine paintbrush. I'm using one of these water painters. Now, I could put the bleach in here, but I've opted to have just a little dish with a secure cover of household bleach. Now, I'm just going to dab it in there just a little. And even though when I put it on, you're going to see that the area that I work on is going to turn like a pale blue, but don't let that bother you, because as it dries, it's going to turn white. So that's the object of this. Partly the object is that you'll be able to clean up some of the areas that you don't want to look artsy or that you don't want to show a splatter of ink. And I'll just do a few here so you can see. It'll actually turn a different color right before your eyes. So that's, you could say that we're going to use the bleach then for two different processes. We're removing the ink from places that we don't want it to go, as you could see here. Or we're going to let it be in the background so that it can look more artsy. You could go to Andy Skinner on YouTube and see the boy that he did with this technique. And I don't know if he adds any other color, but that's what Tina did, was she added a little bit of color to her print, just a little bit. And then she left it as the artsy look like that. So you can see how this is already turning white. I'm going to leave this like this. I'm going to add a little red, then I'm going to take a little red off with the bleach. Now here is what I did yesterday. And I haven't taken off the red. And you know, when you're working live, you have no idea how it's going to turn out. So this is that same poinsettia stamp. You can use the bleach then, not too much, to add a little bit of highlight to your project. And you really have to practice. I would suggest you not try to use it on the card you need to finish in 10 minutes so you can run out the door. Because here you can already see it turning color, and it really doesn't look like a drop of highlight now. It looks more like a cat footprint. So you really do have to practice just a little. Now here is a scene that I did the other day. And this is corn on the cob and 2 sunflowers and some leaves. And I left this here so you could see how I'm going to use the bleach. Take some of that off. And how I used it here was I wanted to add some highlight. Now it might be too much highlight, but I can come back in with my marker then and I can cover just a little. So you get to be very particular about where you're putting your bleach. And what I did on this one with the trees, as I mentioned earlier, this was a mess. I probably wouldn't use this at all, but I wanted to show you what you could do with it to remove the ink then. The side of this tree looked very much like this. It was way too much marker, but I wanted to play with it. So I did the back and forth movements. And I really think that using the bleach in this way caused it to be even more artsy. Now, what I was thinking is, how about flicking it? And then you could have it look like snow. But I'm not quite ready to do that yet. Now, you can see how it's turning blue, right? But it will dry white, as I've shown you on the other prints. Now, how about this bird? I want to get a little bit of that blue off the tip there. This bird, I love it just like it is. It's a little on an angle. But the other thing is, notice this spot. I didn't plan on getting red ink over in the corner. So this is what you can do. And just brush it on any areas that you don't want the ink. And you can see I've added the Clorox or the bleach here. Now I could add some more right here. And I could really get into the fine print of this. So the problem with this one is that it's a orange rubber or a cling rubber stamp. So I was not able to line it up, and I was not using my platform. Now here is what I did with this one. So this is this stamp. And if you don't look at the stamp really well, then you really are not doing yourself a favor by not knowing the details so that you can line it up. So I'm just going to ink it up again with the gray. And Tina always says she gets so hooked on it, and that's the way I am. The instructions from crafters are to try one card of a new design, and why not make 2? Well, yes, to say make 2 is fine, but when you get into a crafty mode like I get into when I get into ink, which I absolutely just love, when I get into it, I have a hard time stopping, and then I have all these prints I have to tell you a mistake I just made in case you ever make the mistake. What I did was I accidentally placed the stamp so that it was 3D side down, and I inked up the smooth back, which is supposed to stick to the block. Well, now I have to wipe that off so that it will be, so I get the ink off of there, because otherwise it's moving around on here and it is not sticking. Okay, let's see. Even those of us that have been making cards for our whole lives, we make mistakes from time to time. And I always like to share that for the one person that's watching that thinks that they can't do it because they made a mistake. Please don't let that stop your creativity. Okay, now I have it inked in the gray, and I'm going to try to line it up the best that I can in this space right here. Now this is dry. Let's see, it looks like, I'll go with that one leaf. Who knows what color I had on my fingers. Hopefully I didn't get any ink where I don't want it to go, but now I know I can remove it. Okay, so now I can decide that I want, that I really like the smudged background. I can come in with my water-based markers, and I can add all sorts of color here, and I can leave that smudged background, and that's kind of the goal. I think I'll remove this little dot here. That is really the goal. And if you go and look at Tina's, she had a truck, and she added green ink to the truck and a little bit of other colors, but you can see the smudging look all the way around it. So if that is, you know, something that you're interested in, I encourage you to do this. Now, this is what I did then. Here's the funny look of how this has dried. It looks like it's just placed right on there. Is it dry? Yes, it's dry, and it's certainly not something that I want to do. This isn't really what I want to do. But here's what I did then. I stamped this nativity scene stamp in the gray, and when it was spritzed with water, I stamped it there. I did exactly the same thing in this section. And then what I did was I let it dry, and it was just as smeared as this one. I shouldn't really say smeared, because when you wet your watercolor paper, that is what happens when you stamp on it, or when you add it with a brush, is it moves wherever the water is. So I started like this, exactly right here. Then when this was dry, then I took the stamp again, inked it up in the gray, and stamped on top of it. And it is kind of, is the word muted. I really like this. I really like that. So would you like to see me stamp up the big, or ink up the big stamp then, and stamp on top of there, and then we could decide what of the extra watercolor areas we want to remove. So again, I think I've inked it up the best that I can. It's clear. Get pretty close. And that's the way it looks. Now you could leave it just like that. You could add, as I did here, just a little yellow over the baby. You could add some blue. You could leave it just like that for sort of a rustic look. Or how about this? This is what I did with this one. It does look a little muddy, but you know, if we don't like all that muddiness, take the bleach, and I would say don't get too close to the to the edge of your paper where the outside line is, because it does bleed a little sometimes and it goes a little farther than you want it to be. You might be able to see that it's already coming off of here. And the other thing it does is it breaks down the fibers, because after all, it is a chemical. So you might find that on some of your pieces too, that the fibers of the paper are coming off with your brush. I also have found that if on this watercolor paper, it's not, the longer you let it dry, which might be happening right here, the longer you let it dry, the harder it is to remove the background with the alcohol. Now let me show you a couple of the things I've done with the alcohol. Excuse me, not the alcohol, with the Clorox. This was a card that I had made in the summer. I ripped off the sentiment, so I'm not using the card as it is, but I wanted to show you. This was a technique where you took a clear stamping block and you added color with 3 separate watercolor markers right across here. Then you spritzed your regular plain cardstock and stamped it down, lifted it up, and that's how I got the pink, the yellow, the blue. Then when that dried, I stamped in black ink a flower right over the top, and you can see then the flowers and the leaves are different color. Now that was before I discovered this Clorox technique. I keep saying Clorox, that's a name brand, but it's bleach. And what I've done then, I just wanted to show you, was I removed all the pink and yellow from this branch right here. Let's see if we can zoom a little bit. From this branch, and I removed the blue from this leaf and branch because I wanted to add a little green. So this is a technique then that you can take to your other inking projects and say, I really would like to have a little bit of white over there, but I don't have a white marker, or I don't have a way to get it in. Now there are little tools that Stampin' Up! Sells. There's blender pens. There's maybe a sponge dauber. I'm not exactly sure. You could even do it with a watercolor pencil. But this, to me, says all you need is this little fine tip brush. And let's see here. Let's see if I can remove the green that I've already added. You can see that it's already starting to disappear, can you not? And if you'd like me to try a different color so you can see, I will put it over here on this blue and see how fast. Again, it has to be water-based. Now look at that. I could completely change the color of something. So keep that in mind, that using bleach can help you erase ink where you don't want it to go. Well, when I started thinking about working on ink on top of white or off-white watercolor paper, I started thinking about, but how would bleach look on colored paper? Now, I was just playing here, but I stamped that bird on this pink paper. I thought if I had stamped him as a cardinal, let's say, I don't think he's a cardinal, but let's say that I stamped him thinking he was a cardinal on red paper, then I would just have to remove what I don't want to be red. And that's what I've done right here. I've removed some of the green. I've added the little accent here on the berries. So I just want to show you that you can add a white effect then to an already colored colored cardstock, plus it takes the color out of the cardstock itself. You can already see that it's starting right here. It's added a little bit of white here. You can see the white under here. Let's get a little more white in his breast there and his feathers. This is almost instant. Now wait till I show you what I did. Now these two cards that I'm going to show you, I took that paintbrush that you see with the bleach on it, and I painted the bleach on this stamp. Not to get too much, and then I stamped right on the cardstock. I really like the blue one. So this is a way that you wouldn't have to add any color at all. So you could add bleach to colored cardstock. You can remove ink, colored ink, from a place that you want to touch it up with a different color. Let's see, what else did we do? You can use bleach to remove this in the background. You could remove some of this and yet leave the artsiness, the dripped paint color look here. So I'm going to be making some cards with some of these prints. This is the one that I did today. You can see the white here that I've done with removing with the bleach. And I haven't really done anything with this yet. So I'll finish this one. Come back to my Instagram, card.connoisseur, or follow me on Facebook, Card Connoisseur Susan Boback, and I'll show the cards that I finished with today's bleach technique. So thanks for joining me, and I always say, go get creative. Bye for now.